Dr. Evans is going to present how an obstetrician can promote the physical and spiritual health of the mother-baby. Lessons learned from a lifetime professional practice. So, Mr. Evans, who started his OB career in 1988 and then ultimately went on to join APPPAH's board of directors, become its medical director, will share how infusing a spiritual perspective into practice leads to better outcomes. Not just in practice, but in the scientific literature. Dr. Evans would like to say that he could never have seen so impactful in the lives of so many mothers and babies without the leadership, love, and support of the leaders of the Prenatal Alliance and APPPAH. Thank you. Thank you so much, Doctor. And I'm also honored to hear this because I'm also a founding member of the Prenatal Alliance. Welcome, and this is your stage right now.
Thank you so much. And I can't tell you how that last sentence that you came out from my bio is really true. I could not have gotten to where I am today without the help and love from this community. It has just been so special. And that has what has allowed me to really have a lifetime of lessons learned, both on the physical aspect of prenatal care and the spiritual health of the mother baby. And so we'll start with a little bit about the physical of what I learned in a lifetime. And this started back in 2004 when I first spoke at my first APPPAH meeting here about bringing holism into birth. And that's a very important time for me. And I remember all the people that I met there. And I talked about one of the many reasons we needed to bring holism into birth. And one of those reasons was from the information that came out of this survey. And what we found was that 19% of mothers never met the person who delivered their baby. And we called that the doctor, your doctor, the stranger. So clearly the energetic dynamics of knowing who is there to help you is so important, something that Prenatal Alliance and APPPAH has always been very much in charge of sending the importance of that message out into the world. And that was in 2004. And now in 2024, this is what we have, which is a March of Dimes report showing there's something called maternity care deserts, where millions of families can't even access maternity care. So we went from just not knowing your provider to not having a provider. So things have gotten worse. And then in 2006, when we looked at the data, we found that the cesarean delivery rate was 31%. And in 2022, it's now 32%. So it's gone up an entire percentage point, which is a lot. Then in 2000, we talked about the ranking of where the United States was in maternal deaths. And what we found is we ranked 11th in maternal deaths, or I mean, sorry, the number was 11 maternal deaths per 100,000 births. And that's a lot, 11. And in 2022, it's doubled. It's now 22 per 100,000. And that's more than 50% higher than the next highest country. So that's clearly the wrong direction as well. And then when we talked about ranking, we were 31st back then in 2002, I mean the year 2000, and now we are 55th. So at least in the United States, we are going in the wrong direction. So on a physical level, from not being able to find obstetrical care at all, and when it's found that it's accompanied by high maternal and high cesarean section rates, there's still tremendous room, not much room, tremendous room for improvement. So, what's the solution? It's the spiritual health. It's understanding the connection between the spiritual health and the physical health. And that's what I learned over my professional lifetime. So the solution is for providers and parents to understand that the mother baby is one unit and that the foundational connection is energetic and spiritual. And that's what will allow this new perspective to infuse itself into mother baby care, starting at preconception into early childhood. So, how do we language this? How do we actually find the language to impart this information to parents? And luckily, it's already been done. So, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. What's the language? The 10 golden rules. And these three very special people took a lead on this project, but this was a project that was done by many. I have zero claim for authorship. I was brought in at the end to help with a little bit of English language editing and couldn't believe what I was reading. And I'm going to just take a little bit of time now to show you the prescience of that language, because it still applies today from 2008. So in the womb, the baby gets physical, psychological, and spiritual information. The obstetrical community doesn't know that. We know about genetics and how babies are formed, which is embryology. Lifelong health is also formed. That's called fetal origins of adult disease. But this is how you language it to the world. Inner balance and cheerfulness, the effect of stress on the emotional makeup of the baby from childhood all the way to adulthood. And then the soul's aptitude to giving love and being a productive member of society, as well as the important character traits of intelligence, the skills and gifts and virtues. And then the importance of what happens in early childhood, because what's born, once this baby is born, it draws not only on what it was exposed to during pregnancy, but the energetics of the family as well. Because the mother is constantly transmitting her energy to her baby, and that changes the biochemistry as well. So she's constantly changing the biochemistry and constantly changing the energetics because the cells imprint and remember everything. And if we flip it to pessimistic thoughts, that's not healthy. That's not healthy for the emotional makeup. It's not healthy for how the body's endocrine system becomes wired. And it leads to aggression. And this is what I presented at the United Nations back in 2004 about how, in order to reduce violence in the world, we have to protect and care for our pregnant women so that they're not stressed and in violent surroundings. And that's how you bring joy into the world and into your family. So this is one little bullet on nutrition that I just want to speak to because this is really a wonderful way to language this for people, right? So the mother's blood transports the materials for her child's first structures and delivers the necessary elements for good development. The quality of nutrition is paramount, as are her joy and inner peace. And there's science that supports these golden rules that I just read to you. I'm going to go through that now. And this is just starting with the importance of nutrition, where we just saw how the mother's blood transports all these important materials. And now the role of nutrition and their implications on health. And so there's a saying we've all heard, you are what you eat. And in reality, you are also what your parents ate. That is such a strong sentence. And it really says what we want to say, which is what you eat when you're pregnant is critically important, not just for how it affects the health of the pregnancy and complication rates of pregnancy, but also the child's health and the adult's health. And so just now, a few references on spirituality, because that's what these golden rules are all about. So, is it important? We all know it is intuitively, but does the science support it? So, this is back in 2011 talking about there's a positive link no matter what the issue is. It's not just pregnancy, between talking about spirituality with your patients and whether it's heart disease, lung disease, cancer, cirrhosis, arthritis, leukemia, you name it. If you can discuss spirituality and infuse a spiritual practice into your patients, that will improve their outcome no matter what the diagnosis is. So this is the foundational paper, and now we're going specific to pregnancy. So what about the spiritual experience of high-risk pregnancy? So this is from a nursing journal. It hasn't hit the physician journal yet as of 2007, but this is talking about the Journal of Obstetric and Gynecology Neonatal Nurses, talking about high-risk pregnancy, where they say that within the challenges of a high-risk pregnancy, and of course, high-risk pregnancies are very challenging, women often struggle to define their spirituality. And that's what's so great about those golden rules, is they give you a definition of spirituality without being preachy or without trying to be directive, saying it's about happiness and connection. And we all know that's what spirituality is. And this is how you can deliver it in a way, that message in a way that's not political. So they struggle to define their spirituality. The Golden Rules gives you the answers, but they did understand that spiritual expression is a key to their health and healing. So women in this study had an intuitive understanding that spirituality was important, but they didn't know how to grasp it. They didn't know how to get it. They didn't know how to bring it into their lives. But then they were able to identify aspects that enabled them to deal with the stress of their high risk experience. So they could think of some aspect of their spirituality, but didn't know how to sort of package it into some sort of global understanding of spirituality. And they felt that that enhanced outcomes for themselves. So basically, the take home here is pregnant women in high risk pregnancies had an intuitive understanding of the importance of spirituality and would try to use what they understood as spirituality to help them, but had no clear understanding of the bigger definition, if you will, of what spirituality is and was. And the paper went further on to say is that interdisciplinary teams caring for these women witness the influence of spiritual beliefs. So providers witness it. They just don't know how to make sense of it either. And so, just telling women, hey, I understand why you're praying, asking them, what are you doing? What is your spiritual belief? And if they say it's prayer, just acknowledging it. And trying to approach a way to deal with the negative emotions of guilt and grief and aloneness, etc. And finally, their conclusion that women describe a search for meaning and a need to feel connected with whatever they hold as sacred. And that's where we, as birth attendants and birth professionals, can have an incredible role because we can connect, we can make them feel connected as we discuss these important topics. Now let's move to faith or spirituality in pregnancy in general. And this paper found that um, one of the themes that came up was that faith or spirituality would help with guidance and support, protection, blessing, and reward, communication with God, strength, confidence, help with difficult choices, and a generalized positive effect. If you were a birth attendant, who would not want your patients to have these wonderful aspects introduced into their pregnancy care? How can you not? And that's why we have this conclusion. These findings point to the importance of attending to spirituality as a resource in pregnancy for those who value it and further explore the meaning of spirituality in pregnancy. And when they say for those who value it, we know from the previous paper that everyone values it, that women intuitively have an understanding, and it's our obligation to language it in a way that they can understand it and approach it. And here we finally see in 2021, it's now hitting the doctors, not just the nurses. So 2021, Clinical Obstetrics and Gynecology, which is a serious journal um, talking about spirituality in pregnancy, written by a physician, and discussing in general the role of spirituality in pregnancy, including the postpartum period. And it highlights the importance of bringing this into a birth, which can be attended to by physicians or midwives in the hospital, but also, obviously, when we're reading this paper, wherever the birth happens. And it then gives you strategies to elicit and integrate spirituality into routine practice. And this I love. I love this because it's not just saying from a soapbox, spirituality is important, but it's giving you techniques to do it. So, yes, golden rules, that's my number one choice. But for this paper, it actually went out into the medical world and told doctors who don't even understand spirituality themselves, in terms of a large group of doctors, but gave them some tools. And this is what they had to say. And I'm curious in the Q&A sessions if you guys will agree that this is a nice way for doctors to bring this topic up for conversation. And so, um, ask women specifically about spirituality, not just religious preference, and then consider giving prompts for patients to think about. Now, does it have to be at the end? No. I would say sometimes it should be at the beginning of the appointment. But again, this is the start. What does it mean for you to be pregnant? Right? In the spiritual world, we call that meaning and purpose. What have you learned about yourself since becoming pregnant? That's knowledge. What is your support? That has to do with connection or feeling alone. Do you feel supported? What's your relationship like with your unborn child and fetus? And I love the language of this question because by saying, what is your relationship like? It assumes that there is a relationship. It's telling the mother that you actually have a relationship. What do you value in your life? And just thinking about that, because then what you value, you transfer onward to the next generation. And what gives you peace? Wonderful questions. Encouraging expression of emotions in birth order journaling, that comes from the golden rules. This comes from, I wonder sometimes if this author had this particular 10 Golden Rules book, encouraging birthing parents to bring their music, etc., facilitating skin-to-skin contact, allowing patients to take the placenta home, and giving mothers the opportunity to discuss their birth experience and make adjustments necessary. I love this last one. Make adjustments necessary to be fully present spiritually, because that can mean anything to anybody. And that's just so important. So how do we visualize these energetic concepts without words? I just love the work of Alex Gray. I'm sure you all are familiar with this, but this is how he looks at energy between two people, with a pregnancy. And, just looking at this is enough, and I don't need, to speak. So those are the physical and spiritual ways um, that affect health in the prenatal period. This has been my lifetime of lessons learned, and again, a thank you to all of my dear friends at APPA and the Prenatal Alliance. And just to show you with one last photo that um, with science, you look at this and you think of the science, and I know, you've seen this photo before because it's out there, but you can't not be touched by the grace. The people in this operating suite are aware of the grace that's the blending of the technology of the science with the energetics and the spiritual world and the esoteric. And once again, thank you all for giving me this opportunity to share my perspective. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you so much. I was breathless when I was listening to you, Mr. Evans, and you were very on time. And thank you also for taking care of the time. And I will convey one question to you from Susanna. And Mr. Evans, what do you think has been the major challenges to bring and integrate this information and this knowledge that you mentioned into the medical system, of course? And this is also, I'm very curious about it since I'm also teaching doctors and nurses, midwives. So please, if you have any answer, we would like to hear.
Yeah, so what I would say is that the average doctor or the average nurse or the average midwife has an understanding of the importance of the spirituality in this process. The challenge is the decision makers, the people that choose speakers for grand rounds, the people that are, deciding what the chapters are in pregnancy textbooks. They have not been displaying a willingness or readiness to get this information out. And so that's the biggest block, because when I lecture about this, I get incredibly positive feedback saying, thank goodness you're talking about this, but I don't get to do it as much as I'd like. And so that's the problem for me, is just the frustration on the lack of invitations to share this information.
Yes, thank you. And also, one more question maybe. Olga asked, have you considered significant to do some work with OB and midwives with their prenatal issues so that they are not triggered?
Yeah, so that, we could call that trauma-informed prenatal care. And that's critically important work. And I know that there have been lectures on that in this very conference. Um, so yeah, that's critically important as well. Um, I'm not an expert on that, so I didn't speak to it, but I agree that it's critically important. And I think if we were, you know, to look at what I was talking about, it was sort of that bigger spiritual piece, the trauma-informed prenatal care is the concept applies to everybody, but usually the issues are specific to a particular mother-baby unit or family unit.
Yeah, correct. Okay, and maybe one more. How has this spiritual dimension affect you personally or change you? If you can. if you can, and if it is not.
Yes, and I wish you would give me 20 minutes for that.
All right, just a few sentences maybe.
But it has totally changed me. And I think that um, you know, if I give a shout out to Laura Uplinger and Carla Machado from 2004 when we were talking about, my reading of Omram Mikhail Avanov, and I thought I was the only one, and she's like, "Oh no, I know all about that," and I was truly blown away. And talk about the importance of connection, because that gave me permission, and I quickly ordered all of his music on pregnancy. He gave lectures on, and writings, and it changed my life, where I now live my life in an authentic way. Um, and every, you know, decision I make goes through the filter of, what's best on the spiritual plane, or what's right on the spiritual plane for me personally and for the planet and the universe.
Thank you so much. So, very, very nice to meet you, even in the online. And thank you for being with us.